All right, bench press. This is going to be our upper body absolute strength movement, and what we're going to run through now is exactly the way that I would set up a client in order to bench press successfully and to remain injury-free whilst creating the most amount of force. So the first thing we want to talk about here is we're going to talk about the foot positioning and the positioning of the athlete upon the bench. So first thing is going to be where Kiva is going to be on the bench in relationship to the barbell or to the rig. So what I'm going to ask you to do is just lie down for me, okay? What I'll be looking for at this point is that she is going to be lying down with her eyes on the opposite side of the barbell from myself. If she was further up the bench and her eyes were either directly under the bar or on my side of the barbell, then we run quite a large risk that during the performance of the bench press, the bar path may come into contact with what we call the J-cups here on the rig. This is distracting and potentially dangerous. So we need to make sure that in an unracked barbell position, she's far enough away from the rig, and that is going to be eyes on the opposing side of the barbell from whoever would be spotting, okay? Next thing we're going to be talking about here is we're going to talk about where her feet are going to be. Now, earlier on when we talked about the deadlift, we talked about ground reaction force and how the creation of a force against the planet is going to be really important in terms of creating a force against gravity. And in terms of the bench press, what we'll be looking to do is think of this as a whole body movement. Too many times we see people think of the bench press as a chest and arm movement only. Your full body must be involved in this. You've got to be braced through the movement. And in order to do that, she's going to have her feet closer back towards her hips, okay? And what we'd also be looking for is they're coming back, but not to the point where any of her foot leaves contact with the ground. So for me, bring it back, this would be a little bit too far because she doesn't have her heels in contact with the ground. In order to create the most force, we need to have the largest surface area in contact with the ground. Less surface area, less reactive force surface, okay? So the foot is going to come a little bit further forwards there. She's got her full foot in contact with the ground. It's not so far forward like what we see sometimes if you see guys benching at the gym is that their feet are a little too far forwards. And when the weight gets heavy, their feet kick up. And that's because subconsciously, they've tried to create ground reaction force, but their feet were in the wrong position to allow them to do it. So it's going to be feet back towards hips, but still flat on the floor. Now, remember our essential motor patterns as well. It might seem a little bit weird that hip abduction, or what we're calling femoral rotation, would play a part in what's an upper body movement. But it does, because it's going to help us, again, to engage all the musculature that's going to be reliant upon to transmit force through the bench. And also what it's going to do is it's going to bring ourselves in what we know is a good position with the knee over the middle of the toe, and it's going to be a wider and more stable base. So there we have it. So setup is going to be eyes on this side or opposite side of the barbell from the spotter, who would be back here. Feet are going to be far enough back that they're still in contact with the ground, able to create a press or a ground reaction force. The knee tracking over the middle of the foot via hip abduction, femoral rotation, and that is going to keep us in a good, safe position with a wide and stable base. All right, next thing we're going to talk about here is shoulder impingement. Okay, can you just sit up for me? All right, great. So one of the things that we find quite often in the bench press is that people experience shoulder discomfort or pain. And what's happened here is what we call a shoulder impingement syndrome. And that happens when the humerus, right, so this bone here is at 90 degrees to the torso. This is the position that shoulder impingement happens. And I'll show you what it feels like. So I'll block here, you hear that you can't lift this any further. I'll lift that up. Do you feel that blocked? Yeah. Right. So when it's blocked inside there, that's our shoulder impingement. Now, 90 degrees, shoulder impinged, and then performing a movement like this, I can feel that clicking around in there. Basically what's going to happen is you're going to saw a hole in your own rotator cuff tendons. This sounds like a really bad idea. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that when we're braced on the bench, we eliminate this 90-degree angle. And the way we're going to do that, or the way that we see power lifters doing it, although to a much more extreme end of the scale, is they get themselves in a little bit of an arched position, okay? So that's going to be important here to help mitigate any shoulder impingement. So what I'd like you to do is just lie down on the bench again, try to think about where your eyes are going to be and how your feet are going to be. Now, what I'm going to do here in the situation that I'm coaching this client is I'm just going to put my hands onto her shoulders in order to block her position. What she's going to do is that she can show me that she can create ground reaction force by pushing her body back towards me, and just let your belly button go towards the ceiling and extend your hips a little. So push against my hands, there, and freeze. Good. So that's going to be a good position now because we've just removed the upper torso from being completely flat. So therefore, we are going to have a little bit of an angle at the shoulder when we're actually benching. I mean, in terms of what we're looking for is, I can kind of slide my hand under there. This kind of goes against what we said in some of the other movements with a neutral spinal position. But in the bench press, it's going to be optimal for maintaining shoulder integrity. Okay? So a little bit different. All right. Next thing is if there's nobody here actually helping to set up the athlete, what she can do is she can just put her hands back here onto the rig and use that to get herself into a good and stable position. Okay, there you go. All right, and bring yourself back. Next thing is we're going to talk about how to actually set ourselves up on the barbell. Now, what we need to do is these J-cups, as we said here, they're called, are quite long, okay? They're quite deep. And what we don't want to do is we don't want to start with the barbell furthest back in the J-cup. Again, what that means is that we might end up hitting the rack, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to have them as far forward in the J-cup as we can, all right? And all I'm going to ask Kiva to do now is to take a grip that for her is going to be comfortable. We're going to figure out the optimal grip width in just a second, okay? So for most people, we're going to take a grip that's going to allow the barbell to pass down outside without interfering with the shoulder. It's going to be about a thumb width. So just go and take that on the bar. Good, okay. What we want to do from here now is we want to make sure that we set our athlete up for success in terms of keeping the wrist stacked and therefore safe, okay? So just relax, and I'll show you what I mean is that what we see a lot of times is people taking the barbell out and they're in this position with their wrist. So the barbell is stacked upon absolutely nothing. And this is a really uncomfortable position to have that wrist fully extended like that. The weight will be pushing down here. And this is going to be something that's going to discourage your client from wanting to bench press if they find it to be an uncomfortable movement. So what we'll be looking for is to stack the wrist in this position here so the barbell is directly upon these bones here. We call the radius and the ulna. So let's get your hands into that position. There we go. Now take your thumb width of grip again. That's a little too narrow. There we go. Good. And what we're going to do in the bench press, you're always going to have your thumbs around the bar for safety. Okay? Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to help her to lift the bar out. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring it over the point of rotation. The point of rotation in the bench press is the shoulder. And she's going to be most stable when the bar is stacked directly upon point of rotation. Okay? And then we'll just bring it back. All right? Just so you know what that feels like. Another point to consider here when we actually begin to perform the bench press is it can be really quite common for an athlete to begin to watch the barbell and their eyes will be moving. It tends to be that when their eyes move, they may begin to move their head as well. We don't want to bring her into a position where her cervical spine isn't neutral. So what we want to do is when I lift the barbell out, you're just going to look at the ceiling. You'll be able to still see the barbell within your peripheral vision, so you're going to know where it is at all times, but we don't want you watching it, okay? So we're going to unrack the barbell again. I'm going to bring it over the point of rotation, and you're going to bring it down under control to this bony protrusion here, which is called your sternum, okay? Like your breastbone, all right? So let's do that. Okay, so hands are on, thumb width grip out, okay, good. We got it stacked over and it's going to come out over the point of rotation, good. Now just slowly bring it down and put it on your sternum and leave it there. Freeze. So what I'm looking for here that you guys might be able to see is the forearms are vertical, okay? So this is a good position for force creation, and then just press it up and it will come back over point of rotation, and then we'll bring it back. Now, what you may not be able to see from that angle was that as Kiva brought the barbell down, at the bottom position, her elbows were really quite far behind her hands, okay? Now, that means that when she begins to press, the bar will have a tendency to want to go towards your feet. So this time when you bring it down, I want you to try and have your elbows underneath where your hands are, or even just a tiny bit in front, okay? So we're going to do the same thing, all right? So fingers on there. Good. Wrap around. Good. Barbell comes over point of rotation. Bring it down to the sternum. There we go. That was much, much better. Good. Forearms are vertical. When it's viewed from the side, we've got the elbows underneath the hands, and now she's going to press, and it comes back over point of rotation. Good. Lovely. And back and rack. All right. So that's the main points of performance of the bench press.